In the history of Islam, there is no moment more delicate, more decisive, and more misunderstood than the days that followed the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Those days were filled with grief, confusion, fear, and uncertainty. The man who had not only brought a new faith but had also held together a fragile and growing community was suddenly gone. For the first time since the birth of Islam, the Muslim community had to face a future without the living presence of the Prophet. In that silence left behind by his passing, a question emerged that would echo across centuries. Who should lead the community now? This question was not theological in the beginning. It was not about doctrine, ritual, or belief. It was a practical and political question, born out of necessity. A community spread across Arabia needed leadership. Decisions had to be made. Order had to be preserved. The Prophet had been not only a spiritual guide but also a statesman, a judge, and a unifying authority. Without him, the structure of the young Muslim society was suddenly exposed. In the shock of his death, many of his companions were unable to accept that he was truly gone. Some refused to believe it. Others were too overwhelmed by grief to think clearly. Yet, even as his body lay unburied, discussions about leadership had already begun. The urgency of politics did not wait for the completion of mourning. It was in this tense and emotionally charged atmosphere that the first cracks appeared. A group of the Prophet's companions gathered in a place known as Saqifa, a meeting hall belonging to one of the tribes of Medina. There, representatives of the Ansar, the people of Medina who had sheltered and supported the Prophet, debated among themselves about who should take charge of the community. They believed that since they had protected Islam in its most vulnerable years, leadership should come from among them. Soon, leading members of the Quraysh, the tribe of the Prophet and the original leaders from Mecca, joined the gathering. They argued that leadership should remain within the Quraysh, as they were the tribe most respected across Arabia and best positioned to maintain unity. In that room, voices were raised, arguments were made, alliances were formed, and in the end, a decision was reached. Abu Bakr, one of the earliest companions of the Prophet and his close friend, was chosen as the first leader of the Muslim community. The title given to him was Caliph, meaning successor or deputy. Many accepted this decision quickly, seeing it as the best way to preserve stability. Others accepted it reluctantly, fearing chaos if the community fractured. But some felt a deep sense of unease. Among those who did not immediately support this decision were members of the Prophet's family and a small group of his closest supporters. They believed that leadership should not have been decided in haste, without broader consultation. More importantly, they believed that Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, had the strongest claim. Ali was not only related to the Prophet by blood and marriage. He had been among the first to accept Islam. He had grown up in the Prophet's household. He had fought in nearly every major battle. He was known for his courage, his knowledge, and his devotion. To those who supported him, it seemed natural that leadership should pass to him, keeping authority within the family of the Prophet. At this stage, however, the disagreement was still limited. It had not yet become a permanent division. Many who supported Ali chose not to openly challenge Abu Bakr, fearing that open conflict would tear apart the fragile community. For the sake of unity, Ali himself eventually gave his allegiance to the new caliph, though the sense of injustice lingered. In the years that followed, the Muslim empire expanded at a breathtaking pace. Under Abu Bakr and then under Umar, armies moved beyond Arabia into Syria, Iraq, Persia, and Egypt. New lands were conquered, new peoples were brought under Muslim rule, and enormous wealth began to flow into the community. With success came new problems. The simplicity of the early days gave way to complexity. Power, wealth, and privilege entered a society that had once been defined by sacrifice and equality. Old tribal rivalries resurfaced. New political factions emerged. The question of leadership, which had been set aside for the sake of unity, quietly continued to shape loyalties and resentments beneath the surface. When the third caliph, Uthman, came to power, these tensions intensified. Uthman was accused of favoring members of his own family in appointments and distributing wealth unfairly. Protests grew. Delegations came to Medina to demand reform. In the end, rebels surrounded his house and killed him while he was reading the Quran. The murder of a caliph shattered the moral foundation of the community. For the first time, Muslims had killed their own leader. Trust collapsed. Fear spread. Revenge was demanded. The question was no longer only who should rule, but how justice could be restored. Ali was finally chosen as caliph after Uthman's death. Yet his rule was immediately challenged. Some demanded that he punish Uthman's killers at once. Others accused him of protecting the rebels. Former allies turned into enemies. The community descended into civil war. Battles were fought between Muslims against Muslims. The Battle of the Camel pitted Ali against Aisha, the widow of the Prophet. The Battle of Siffin set Ali against Muawiyah, the powerful governor of Syria. Arbitration failed. Authority weakened. Extremists assassinated Ali while he prayed in a mosque. With Ali's death, power passed to Muawiyah, who established a dynastic rule. The caliphate was no longer chosen by consultation but inherited like a monarchy. This change altered the very nature of Islamic governance. For many, it felt like a betrayal of the Prophet's ideals. Ali's supporters did not disappear. They continued to believe that leadership belonged to the family of the Prophet. They became known as the Shiite Ali, the party of Ali. Over time, this political loyalty transformed into a distinct religious identity. The final and most tragic chapter came with Ali's son, Hussein. When Muawiyah died, his son Yazid claimed the caliphate. Hussein refused to give allegiance to a ruler he considered unjust and corrupt. He traveled with a small group of family members and followers toward Iraq, hoping for support. Instead, he was surrounded by Yazid's army in the desert of Karbala. Outnumbered, cut off from water, and abandoned by promised allies, Hussein and his companions were massacred. Hussein himself was killed, and his family was taken captive. The death of Hussein transformed the division forever. What had begun as a dispute over leadership became a story of martyrdom, suffering, and moral resistance. For the Shia, Hussein became the symbol of standing for justice against tyranny, even at the cost of life itself. Karbala became the heart of their identity. For the Sunni majority, the tragedy of Karbala was mourned, but the focus remained on preserving unity and stability. They accepted the political order, even if imperfect, as preferable to endless civil war. Over time, legal schools developed, theological traditions formed, and two distinct paths of Islam emerged. Leslie Hazelton's book After the Prophet tells this story not as a tale of villains and heroes, but as a human drama. She shows how fear, ambition, loyalty, love, and grief shaped decisions that no one at the time could have known. Would echo for 14 centuries. Her central argument is simple yet profound. The Shia-Sunni divide did not begin as a religious disagreement. It began as a political crisis. Only later did theology grow around it. Only later did ritual, doctrine, and identity harden the lines that history had first drawn. She portrays Abu Bakr as a cautious stabilizer, Umar as a forceful builder of empire, Uthman as a gentle but politically weak ruler, and Ali as a man of deep principle unsuited to ruthless politics. None are saints, none are demons. All are human beings struggling under impossible pressure. In Hazelton's telling, the tragedy lies not only in the blood that was shed, but in the opportunities lost. Opportunities for compromise, for patience, for restraint. Each act of violence made the next more likely. Each betrayal justified another. History became a chain of reactions. What makes this story so powerful is its relevance. The conflicts that tear apart parts of the modern Muslim world often draw on these ancient divisions. Political leaders invoke old loyalties. Militias claim the legacy of Karbala or the authority of the caliphate. The past becomes a weapon in the present. Yet Hazelton does not write to inflame. She writes to explain. She invites the reader to see how fragile unity can be, how easily fear turns into hatred, and how quickly moral certainty can blind people to the cost of their actions. Her book reminds us that divisions are not born overnight. They grow slowly, nourished by memory, ritual, and repeated storytelling. Each generation inherits not only faith, but grievance. In the end, After the Prophet is not only a book about Islam. It is a book about power, about succession, about what happens when a charismatic founder leaves no clear plan for what comes next. It is a story that could belong to any civilization, any religion, any empire. It asks a question that still matters today. How do communities choose leaders without destroying themselves? How do they balance justice and stability? How do they prevent from becoming? Perhaps the greatest lesson of this history is not about who was right or wrong, but about the price of unresolved conflict. A single question left unanswered can shape centuries. A single moment of haste can divide millions. If we listen carefully to this story, not with the ears of partisans but with the eyes of historians and the hearts of human beings, we may learn something that goes beyond sects and creeds. We may learn that unity is fragile, that power corrupts, that memory wounds, and that understanding the past is the first step toward healing the present.